Strange sounds behind the dark side of the moon. Mutated bodies after 10 days in deep space. 6 minutes that nearly killed the crew. Photos NASA will never let you see. Those are real headlines. Each one pulled hundreds of thousands of views. A few crossed 1 million. All of them are about the same mission. Artemis II, April 1st, 2026. And none of them, not one, comes from a NASA report. I spent 3 weeks reading the post-flight logs from NASA, the pre-launch reviews, the interviews the 4 astronauts actually gave to reporters between mid-April and last week. Every word on the record. I'll tell you what really happened. Some of it is mundane. Some of it is genuinely strange. None of it is what got the clicks. Here's the thing. The truth is more interesting than the lie. We just stopped listening to it. 4 people climbed into the Orion capsule on April 1st. They named the spacecraft Integrity. They chose that name themselves, not NASA, not a committee, them. Reed Wiseman commanded the mission. He's not new to space. Back in 2014, he spent 165 days on the International Space Station as part of Expedition 41, running experiments and doing spacewalks, watching the Earth from 250 miles up. He's a Navy test pilot, the kind of man who reads checklists for fun. Victor Glover was the pilot. He flew Crew Dragon 1 in 2020, the first operational SpaceX mission to the station. He's also the first black astronaut to travel beyond low Earth orbit. Quiet, methodical, ex-Navy F-18 pilot. Christina Cook held the mission specialist seat, and she holds something else. 328 days. That's how long she stayed in continuous orbit between 2019 and 2020. The longest single spaceflight by any woman, ever. The 4th seat went to Jeremy Hansen, Canadian Space Agency, fighter pilot before that. And here's a detail almost nobody mentioned. No Canadian had ever traveled beyond low Earth orbit before April 1st. He's the first. 2 Americans with deep flight history. 1 woman who lived in orbit for almost a year. And 1 Canadian doing something no one from his country had done before. Together, they were going to fly farther from Earth than anyone in 53 years. But to even get to April 1st, the mission had to survive its own ground crew. 4 separate moments almost killed the launch before it ever happened. First, January. A winter storm rolls across Florida, the kind of cold front that ices over runways at Kennedy Space Center. Rollout to the launch pad gets postponed. Not a crisis, just an opening. The schedule starts slipping. February 2nd, wet dress rehearsal. This is the practice countdown where they fuel the rocket and stop at the moment of liftoff. During the test, a hydrogen leak. Liquid hydrogen at -423 degrees Fahrenheit, bleeding out of a fuel line. They scrub, they postpone. The launch slides to March. 3rd, February 21st. The second wet dress rehearsal had gone clean 2 days earlier. Then, a helium flow issue. Helium pressurizes systems on the rocket. Without it, parts of the launch sequence can't work. NASA makes a call most people in the industry didn't expect. Roll the whole stack back into the vehicle assembly building. Take the rocket off the pad. April now. And 4th. This one didn't even happen on the pad. It happened in a conference room. The heat shield on Orion uses a material called Avcoat. After Artemis I returned in 2022, engineers found more char loss on the shield than expected. Chunks of the protective layer had come off during re-entry. For 3 years, NASA argued internally about whether to redesign it before flying crew. In January 2026, Administrator Jared Isaacman made the call. We fly with the existing shield. We redesign for Artemis III. Some engineers signed off relieved. Some signed off angry. Both were on the record. 4 off-ramps. 4 chances for the mission to die quietly in a hangar. And what still gets me about this part of the story, not one of them got a clickbait headline. because none of them involve monsters. Then April 1st arrived. April 1st, 6:35 in the evening, Eastern Time. The countdown ran clean. The final terminal count handed over to the ground sequencer. SLS lit its engines. 4 RS-25 engines firing at full thrust. 2 solid rocket boosters. 8.8 million pounds of force all at once, pushing 5.75 million pounds of rocket off the pad in a controlled explosion you could see from 40 miles away if you were standing on the right beach. Inside the capsule, the crew didn't feel like passengers. They felt like cargo. 3 times normal gravity pressing them into their seats. Vibration that engineers had spent 20 years trying to design out. The solid boosters alone supplied more than 75% of the thrust during the first 2 minutes. Then they separated. The core stage cut off. The upper stage took over. Orion was in space. Day 1 was paperwork, or the orbital equivalent. Checkout procedures, system tests. They deployed 4 CubeSats from international partners into Earth orbit. Small satellite payloads about the size of a shoebox each. Day 2, Orion's service module fired its main engine. Translunar injection, the burn that takes a spacecraft out of Earth orbit and puts it on a path to the Moon. Once that engine cut off, there was no easy way back. By day 3, they were farther from Earth than any human being had been since December 1972. Day 6, the closest approach, 4,067 miles. That's how far above the lunar surface Orion passed at its nearest point. To put that in context, the Moon is about 2,160 miles across. So they passed within roughly 2 moon widths of it, close enough to see craters by direct sight, not just on a screen. For about 50 minutes, radio contact with Houston dropped. This is normal. It happened to every Apollo crew that flew around the back of the Moon. The Moon physically blocks the signal. There is no antenna network on the far side. There has never been one. And so for those 50 minutes, the 4 people on board were the most isolated humans alive. Now, here is what they actually saw through the Orion windows. A surface they had only ever seen in photographs. Direct line of sight to terrain that 24 other humans before them had also seen. And that's the whole list. 24. 3 of the Artemis crew, Wiseman, Glover, and Koch, gave interviews after Splashdown about that view. None of them used dramatic language. Words like humbling, quieter than expected. It looked exactly like the photos, except it was outside the window. That's the real testimony from people who were there. Now, here is what they did not see. They did not hear strange sounds in the radio. One viral video, titled, quote, "The terrifying sound Artemis II recorded outside their spacecraft," pulled over 200,000 views. That sound is not in any mission audio log. Another video, claiming to reveal what the crew heard behind the Moon, pulled 200,000 more. Same story. Not in the transcripts, not in the post-flight briefings, not anywhere. They did not see hidden photos. Every image the crew brought back is on the NASA Flickr account, public domain, free to download right now. They did not experience 6 minutes that nearly killed them. The closest approach passed clean. The free return trajectory worked exactly as designed in 1968, the same trajectory Apollo 8 used. And the medical workups, when they came back? Normal. Every one of them. Whatever the phrase "not human anymore" is supposed to mean, that is not what the data shows. We will get to that in a few minutes. What gets me about this whole part of the story, the real thing happened, and we collectively chose to invent a worse version. Because the real version doesn't have a thumbnail. So what did actually go wrong? A urine vent line. I'm not making this up. The system that vents waste fluids overboard from the Orion capsule started behaving in ways the crew did not expect. Somewhere between the lunar flyby and the return to Earth, it acted up. NASA confirmed the anomaly in the public assessment summary issued after splashdown. Engineers will adjust the configuration before Artemis II. The crew handled it in flight without incident. Now hold that picture in your head. The actual technical incident on board the first crewed mission to the moon in 53 years was a plumbing issue. Meanwhile, online, a video called "The 4 Minutes That Will Decide If Artemis II Astronauts Survive" was pulling 600,000 views. Another, about the 6 minutes that nearly ended them, 700,000. A third, about astronauts being not human anymore, over 250,000. The real 4 minutes that mattered were spent rerouting fluid valves. And honestly, that's what the truth of space usually looks like. It is not horror, it is engineering. Sometimes it is plumbing. The people who do this work for a living are not surprised by that. The rest of us just stopped listening, because plumbing does not trend. April 10th, 5:07 in the afternoon, Pacific Time. Orion splashed down in the ocean off the coast of San Diego. The recovery ship, the USS John P. Murtha, was already in position. Navy divers reached the capsule within minutes. Imagery of the heat shield, taken underwater right after splashdown, showed something the engineers had been quietly hoping for. The char loss, the chunks of protective material that had come off during the Artemis I re-entry, was significantly reduced this time, both in quantity and size. Whatever decision Isaacman made back in January, the data after splashdown suggested he had not been wrong. The crew was extracted, standard procedure. Medical workups began on the recovery ship and continued back on land. Nothing in the readings flagged any concern. Whatever 10 days in deep space does to the human body, and we will know more in 6 months when the full studies are published, it was not what the clickbait promised. No one came back ill. No one came back transformed. They came back tired and sore, blinking at the California sun. 694,481 miles in 10 days, officially logged. That is farther than any human had traveled in either direction since the last Apollo mission in 1972. They came back fine. But, and this is where I want to stop and be honest, there is one thing the clickbait headlines almost got right. Almost. They just pointed at the wrong target. Here is what the clickbait got right, in a sideways kind of way. Something did happen during those 10 days that nobody noticed. In March 2026, while the rocket was being prepped on the pad, NASA quietly announced the cancellation of the Lunar Gateway, the orbital station that was supposed to live in cislunar space, the waypoint where Orion was supposed to dock on every future Artemis mission, where lunar landers would meet the crew before going down to the surface. Gone. No press conference, no agency-wide statement, a line in a budget document, and then it just wasn't part of the architecture anymore. This matters because Artemis III, currently targeted for 2027, will now land on the lunar surface without a station above it. No backup, no staging area. The lander goes down, the crew comes back up to Orion, and Orion comes home. That is the whole plan now. Whether that is the right call is a different conversation. But it is genuinely a bigger structural change to the moon program than anything that happened during the 10 days Artemis II was in flight, and almost nobody covered it. Because, and I think this is the actual lesson of this whole story, fake astronaut horror gets a thumbnail. Real space program restructuring does not. If you want more videos that dig into what is actually changing in space, what the agencies are quietly doing, what the data actually says, subscribe, and in the comments, tell me which clickbait headline from the last month you almost believed. I want to know which ones got through. There is one more thing about Artemis II that I want to leave you with. December 14, 1972. Gene Cernan was the last man to step off the lunar surface. Apollo 17 commander, astronaut and engineer, Navy pilot before that. As he climbed the ladder back into the lunar module, he said a line that became famous in space history circles. "We shall return." He died in January of 2017, 82 years old. He never saw it. He missed it by 9 years. On April 1st, 2026, 4 people climbed into a spacecraft they had named Integrity, and they did the thing he promised. They did not find monsters on the dark side of the moon. They did not hear sounds that defied science. They did not come back wrong. A urine vent line acted up. The heat shield held. The crew came home. And here is what gets me every time I sit with this story. The truth was always more interesting than the lie. We just got bored of listening for it. See you in the next one.